All right, the room quieted down. So all I had to do was stand up and everybody's quiet. I really appreciate everybody showing up for the 4:30 session. You know, sometimes things at the end of the day is a little bit harder to get people to show up. But I think we've got a really good session for you today. My name is Julie Auger. I am at the Salk Institute. And I participated in a session last year called The Evolution of Course. And we had such a great response, and there was so much discussion that the organizers this year thought that it would be good to have a follow-up conversation about how cores are evolving. So we've got a really good agenda. I just briefly put the agenda up here. We have Christina Kletti from BD Biosciences is going to give us an introduction into what BD Biosciences is doing right now. Thank you very much, Christina, for your sponsorship. We really appreciate it. And then actually, Isabelle is going to go first instead of going last, but I'll introduce Isabelle. Actually, you know what? I'm going to introduce all of the speakers right now so we don't have to have too much time in between for transition. So Isabelle Girard from UC Davis is going to give us a talk entitled Creating a Core Community, Sharing Expertise, Solving Problems, and Driving Strategy. Isabelle is, I've worked with Isabelle for many years. She is also had suggested a topic, apparently, I learned earlier today, on central support for cores. If some of you guys went to that session at 1 o'clock, you would have seen Isabelle was pointed out then, but I'm really looking forward to hearing her talk, and it was great that we could combine our sessions together. Then Karolien Denef from Colorado State is going to talk about what they have done at Colorado State in terms of uniting cores and insights from her core merger and centralization experience. And then finally, Rajesh Uthamanthil is going to, from Seattle Children's, is going to reprise his talk from last year. He actually was a speaker in the session and co-organizer with me last year. He's going to talk about building a cross-functional shared resources program. So I think we're going to have lots of time. We're hoping to have lots of time at the end for questions. So I'm going to kind of hold questions at the end, but the thing that was great about our session last year is there was a lot of discussion and conversation afterwards. And so I'm hoping that we'll have that as well. So prime your questions, and I look forward to being back up here to moderate that. But for now, Christina, please. Okay, Dylan already stood up because he knows I'm going to not get this right. Actually, what I've done is, Dylan, I've lost the mouse.
It's on the screen, Julie. You got to slide it over.
How do I get it over here?
Slide it that way.
Other way. Oh, I found it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're done with this one?
Yeah, and then right here.
This one?
Yeah. Really, you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. I am the epitome of that. It's never good when your AV support says, uh-oh.
No, we're good.
Oh, we're good. Thanks, Dylan.
Awesome. Thanks, Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Christina Kletti, as we already mentioned. I'm here to talk to you about what we offer at BD and how we have a complete portfolio for the single-cell multiomics workflow. Spend some time talking to you about that before we actually get into the really engaging content here today. So at BD, we have a complete portfolio to handle a single-cell multiomics workflow. And this workflow is very comprehensive in the sense that it can span and integrate across multiple core labs or different types of core labs that may be touching a part of the single-cell workflow. So I'm going to take you through sample prep and sorting all the way through to high-dimensional analysis using the BD Rhapsody pipeline. So we have a plethora of cell sorters at BD. Our new one is the BD Fax Discover SA cell sorter. This is a new to world technology where it combines spectral sorting along with real-time cell imaging. So you can actually look at every single cell. I'm going through this and sort it based on phenotypic and morphological characteristics along with your typical spectral properties that cell has. And then moving into, we also have quite a few preservation and labeling reagents for the single cell multi-omics workflow. So we have the ability to multiplex samples, up to 24 samples per experiment or run. So we have multiplexing. They're antibody-based, based on our AB oligoconjugates technology. We also can do site-seq analysis using those AB-seq oligos. We both have extracellular and intracellular antibodies for site-seq. And then we have this new reagent out called BD Omics Guard Sample Preservation Buffer. I will spend some time talking that to you in the next few slides, but it's really great because it's a great stopping point for people who want to have single cell suspension at the end of the day of a long workflow, right, where you're prepping your samples, and you can stop and store those for 72 hours before you move into any downstream analysis, really. So I'll talk to you more about that. But and then we have the BD Rhapsody system for cell capture. So we have the ability to use just the HT Express system, which is the cell partitioning system. It's a gravity-based system. And then we also have a quality control system called the scanner here. And this is the only system really on the market that can do quality control before you go into expensive sequencing. So you can make decisions about the quality of your cells and experiment before you do that. And then we have a plethora of assays and reagents to handle your multi-omics, from gene expression assays, whole transcriptome or targeted. We also have gene regulation, so a new ATAC-seq assay that we will be talking about in a few slides, as well as immune repertoire profiling. Also coming out soon is, I don't know how many of you have done manual library prep before, but it's quite long and cumbersome. So for anybody that does NGS library prep. So we're actually collaborating with Hamilton Robotics to automate the library prep of our assays. And then of course we have our BD Rhapsody pipeline. So these are really nice that can integrate, like I said, across multiple cores. A lot of people in the flow core typically like to handle this portion of the workflow or a single cell core where you can actually stop at the capture. And we have bead technology that allows you to store your cDNA up to 1 year at 4 degrees Celsius. So that's really nice because it allows for collaboration. And you can send it to the sequencing or the single cell core to take that step further into library preparation and sequencing. So good stopping point here to switch between cores. Okay, so BD Omics Guard, a little more on this. So this is our new preservation reagent. It's actually a one-step protocol where you basically just drop your single cell suspensions into the buffer and store it up to 72 hours at 4 degrees C. So stress-free, helps break up that long workflow to take some time to stop. We also, it does preserve the cell viability, and it actually preserves transcriptomic and proteomic information in cells that are stored at it for 72 hours. We've tested it on multiple sample types, so multiple different cell types and tissue samples, and we have it in multiple formats depending on what the volume of your experiment is. The nice thing about this is you can use it on lots of different downstream applications, not just single cell multi-omics. So people that are using flow cytometry analysis can use it. Any bulk sequencing or single cell sequencing, site-seq, as well as qPCR, just to name a few. It's also compatible with all platforms, not just the BD Rhapsody or single cell workflow that we offer. And so it's very versatile. And then we just recently launched our intracellular site-seq assay. So not too many people out there have that ability to offer intracellular antibody staining for multi-omics. And this product supports high-plex proteomic profiling up to 100 protein markers. It's also a nice point where you can stop in the workflow after you stain with site-seq before you go to cell capture. It's also compatible with all of our other products in our Rhapsody portfolio, so multiplexing as well as all the downstream library preparation assays. Okay, and then the system itself, the HT Express system and the scanner, or the Rhapsody single cell analysis system, it uses gentle and robust microwell technology. So the nice thing about this is you don't see sample loss due to clogging or wetting errors with other types of technology, as well as you can handle different types of cells and cell morphologies. And because of the gentle nature of the microwell technology, you're able to capture those fragile cell types like neutrophils, granulocytes, things like that are sensitive to other types of manipulation techniques. We've recently expanded the throughput on this system. So the consumable, which is the cartridge that has the microwell technology, it's flexible in the fact that you can use one or all 8 lanes at one time. You can come back to it later, so it's a partial use, so meaning you don't have to throw the cartridge away if you only use one lane. You can come back later and use the other lanes. We actually expanded the throughput up to 800,000 cells in that one cartridge, so that's 100,000 cell input into one lane. We still see 80% capture rates at that highest cell input number as well. And then as I mentioned before, the beads here are what capture all that transcriptomic and proteomic information. Once they're collected off the cartridge, you have the ability, as I mentioned, to store those beads after the cDNA has been synthesized on them up to a year at 4C, as well as subsample them. So if you don't want to use your entire sample and you want to save it for a different assay, or just in case you want to see what the assay looks like before you use all of your sample, you can subsample the system as well. And then we have our Rhapsody scanner. So this actually has the ability to check your cell load as well as your bead load, and all kinds of quality control metrics in the cartridge while you're doing your cell capture. So it can tell you basically how many viable cells you're pairing with a bead throughout the process and how many cells you're expected to get in sequencing. That way you can decide if you want to proceed or not with your sequencing. So this is really nice, especially for core labs who like those quality control reports that they can provide and ensure their end users that they have good results on the system. All right, and this is brand new, actually launching this week. This is our new Rhapsody ATAC-seq assay. So this is for gene regulation. We've seen very remarkable performance with this. It's very highly specific and sensitive with different cell lines as well as primary cells and tissues. It's compatible with a multi-omics approach with whole transcriptome analysis. So that's really nice. You can also use it with our sample tags as well as with the BD omics guard if you want to do sample preservation upstream. And then we have a new BD Rhapsody TCR-BCR Next multi-omic assay. This is your full-length immune repertoire profiling of the T cell and B cell receptors. We've improved the performance of this assay, so the pairing efficiency is very high now in this assay for the T cell and B cell receptors. It's also multi-omic enabled, so you can do targeted or whole transcriptome analysis alongside, and it's also compatible with our upstream reagents, the BD omics guard, sample preservation buffer, as well as multiplexing antibodies. And coming soon, as I mentioned, we have automated library preparation. So as I mentioned, we are collaborating with Hamilton Robotics. We're working with them actually to automate our assays on the Hamilton NGS Star. This platform is widely used in genomic cores for lots of different library preparation assays. So it is a standardized, open, and flexible system that if you already have it or you're thinking about getting it, you can just add the script for our assays onto the system and also use it for other things that your customers may be asking for. So we're automating, like I said, our Rhapsody line of library prep assays onto it. And again, this will just help standardize things and reduce that human error that you see when you do manual assays. So that's it. Thank you so much. If you're interested in any of our lightning talks or had missed them, you can come to our booth to learn more or watch the recordings. But come check out Haiwan tomorrow in the Lakeshore A. She'll be talking about antigen-specific B-cell receptor clonal expansion and mutations at the single cell level using our system. And also, we have an Omics 2024 seminar series. So if you're interested, you have Rhapsody products or BD products, or you might be thinking about getting them, we are happy to customize a seminar for your lab and come in and speak to everybody there about it. So please contact us if you'd like to, or come to our booth to talk about this, or I'll hang out afterwards if you're interested as well. Give people time to scan that. But again, come to our booth. We're in booth 405. If any of this sparks some interest, we'd be happy to talk to you further. Thank you so much.
You have the mouse action down now?
Not really, but we'll see. Oh, look at that. Dylan's on standby. He's already out of his seat.
He hasn't made a move up here yet.
No,
He has faith in you.
I hope so.
It's looking good.
Yeah.
Those are even my slides. Wow, good job.
Yeah. Dylan, you can relax. It's all good.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Julie, for inviting me to join this session. It's with a little bit of irony that I'm going to be talking to you about creating a community of practice because, of course, you are here in a community of practice, practicing that community. So you already know all of the benefits of a community of practice. A community of practice is just a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something that they do and learn how to do better as they interact regularly. And what I'd like to do is add to that standard definition that a community of practice can also be used to educate and to advocate. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how communities of practice have been really important in driving decisions and strategic directions for two universities, UW-Madison and UC Davis. And I want to encourage you, if you don't have a community of practice in cores at your own institution, that you should create one to do many of the things for your own institution that we're doing here. Some of the talks in this session are going to be about centralizing and about joining resources, and sometimes we tend to think that those are driven by leadership. And what I want to convince you of is the power of the grassroots organization and how the fact that nobody has given you this job actually gives you a lot of freedom to move in the core landscape and to influence decisions. So a community of practice includes three components: the domain, which is the area of skill, and of course in this context it's going to be cores. But I would also like to encourage you, as you think of a community of practice at your own institution, to think about kind of acquiring adjacent domains in funding, in investment, in leadership, in strategic decision making. Don't think of your community of practice as only those people who work in cores. You're trying to have a campus-wide influence, and you'll want to bring in other domains that are outside your skill area. Just go ahead. It's a community of practice. You can kind of expand as you want. The practice is what you do, and then the community are the members and who you are. And again, there, I'll encourage you to think about not just core staff, but those adjacent folks who are working in finance, in contracting, in legal, in marketing, to include in your core community. A really thriving core community will pay attention to and foster 5 key elements, including a sense of place, a sharing of common interests, joint action, social ties, and a real honoring of diversity within the community. I think of a community of practice and the core community as kind of a neighborhood park, right? There's a sense of place where people gather and all kinds of different people participate with a range of different activities. This is what makes a community of practice different than a work group. You have a range of activities. You have a range of ways in which people will participate. None of it is required. All of it is volunteer. Roles are fluid. People will drift in and out, and you allow that. You don't have to plan activities where everybody needs to participate. You plan on that sometimes you will have people who are just strolling by on the sidewalk watching what's going on. You'll have people who have sports leagues and show up every week. You'll have people who tend the gardens, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about how to create a community of practice, and then give you some examples of the real effects that communities of practice had at 2 of the institutions where I've been. So the steps are laid out in this particular example, but they really are organic. First, you start with curating your group, and you start with co-leaders or co-conspirators. These are people who are going to really help advocate for your core community and advocate for cores. And again, you're going to invite different levels of interaction, allow for varying levels of participation. Some of your group are going to be members, some of them are leaders, sponsors, champions, equivalent to those people in your neighborhood park. And these roles are fluid. Somebody who is a champion on one issue in your core community might only be a kind of passerby on another issue. And this is, again, a key design to the community. Another important part of curating your group is that you really do have to abandon hierarchies and titles. You have to allow all of your members to exist in equal standing with equal opportunity and to allow them to have fluid roles. Again, this makes it different than working groups where you're appointed and you're appointed based on a title and you might have a role that is, still in this matrix organization and you feel like you can't take the leadership or somebody has to designate responsibility. You can make it clear that everyone participates regardless of hierarchy and title. You'll establish principles, and for our core communities, honesty, collegiality, and confidentiality are really key. We make it clear that we value diversity and open communication, and then your own community will identify its community-specific needs, which can change over time. You need to create a space, which can be virtual, physical, hosted, not hosted. Space can take many forms. For example, at UC Davis, Julie Auger really started a core community around the time of COVID, when everybody went home and were trying to work remotely. We didn't have a lot of information. How did we accommodate cores? So we had a weekly Zoom meeting that she established really for open conversation, at that time for sharing information, trying to come up with solutions. So that was the space that this community met in. It can have a formal agenda, informal discussions. At UW-Madison, we called our coffee crew because we met always in a coffee shop. And again, the difference with a core community is not every member needs to engage in every space. So you don't have to worry about scheduling something that everybody can do every time. Okay? It's okay if only some people can do some of the things. It's also really important that you have a distributed role of coordinator or lead. This you have to establish early because you need different people to take ownership of the community on different topics and different areas. And this is something you have to pay attention to early on. For your core community to have value, you have to design activities with engagement. These events are not opportunities for somebody to push information down on your audience. Okay? These are really activities of engagement. Core staff are already overworked. They do not need another meeting or event to go to where they just sit and listen. These activities have to be planned to provide value for the cores, and they should be engaging and interactive. I'll give you a few examples of activities. For example, The Ohio State University, their cores participate in a weekend bike ride that benefits Cancer Center, and the cores receive some of the funding from that. I mentioned the weekly Zoom meetings as part of the Cores Connect community at UC Davis, and at UW-Madison, we had workshops for NIH S10 writing. These were not information sessions about how to write an S10. This was bring your document, bring your word processor. We had people who had applied for grants. We had people who were applying for grants. We had people from sponsored projects. We're going to be here for 2 hours, and you're going to improve your S10 application right here. All right? That had a lot of value. That happened in real time. For your core community to share its resources and have some sort of presence, some sort of output is really important. This can be, as I list here, the standard mechanisms or channels, email, newsletters. I really emphasize a website. Kind of a website sort of makes you exist to a university, gives you lots of places people can link to and find you. At UW-Madison, we had a physical presence in an office in the Wisconsin Institutes of Discovery. We timed our meetings and our gatherings to coincide with leadership meetings that also happened in that building. So literally, the chancellor and vice chancellor would see us gathering, and she knew that we existed as this entity. And a website can also help you do that. Our UC Davis Coors Connect community has a website where we post lots of resources and follow up on our discussions. You want to grow the community and distribute the leads. So again, bring additional members as relevant to the domain. We've had people from facilities to talk about our challenges in cores about getting work done. Things changed as a result of those conversations because folks in facilities understood better the constraints that we were under. We understood better how the facilities worked, and really those relationships improved markedly after this engagement with the community. And I can give you lots and lots of examples of engaging with purchasing and contracting and adjacent folks in the core community. And again, develop the distributed leadership. We made the facilities folks the leaders of that conversation, and that really helped bring them on as allies. And sometimes we bring in people that are not acting as allies, and we hope that at the end of the engagement that they're really on our side. You have to perform meaningful work. Okay? Sometimes meaningful work can be the social connections, but you want to be mindful of only providing social connections. I'll give you two examples of really impactful things that the core community did both at UW-Madison and at UC Davis. So UW-Madison, the core's crew wanted money from the chancellor for equipment upgrade and revitalization. The chancellor was offering no money. She didn't ask for a proposal. They still drafted a proposal, tried to make an argument for why this investment was sound, the benefits, the scope, etc. A few months passed. The chancellor heard about a similar type of program at a peer institution that UW-Madison's always competing with and said, we want that here. What can we do? And literally 5 minutes later, I had this proposal on her desk. And that proposal essentially became the funding program that funded $2 million a year for 3 years. That came from the cores. Another example is at UC Davis, we recently got a new vice chancellor of research, and the cores had a little trepidation about what would the VCR know about cores, and how could we ensure that this new VCR was oriented to cores in a really helpful way. And so they drafted a 1 or 1.5 page summary of these are the things we want the VCR to know, 5 points about cores. We drafted that. I wasn't exactly sure where it would go. The VCR came on board. In the first week said, if you have an onboarding document for me, I'd be willing to read it. Boom, there it is. It's right there. He read that, asked for a meeting. He talked with the cores. This is all within the first weeks of him coming on board. He has the cores' voice, and the cores' identified concerns are the first things that he hears about that structure. A few months later, when they start a strategic task force across the university, advocated for by the provost, he advances this list of concerns to the task force and says, these are the concerns I want you to address for cores. It came from cores. Now imagine if that task force didn't have that information and invented the things that it needed to address for cores. We would have come up with a very, very different list. So these are really impactful things that are driving strategy and benefits for the core community. Last step is evaluate and evolve. Every once in a while you want to check in with your core community. Is it achieving what you want? Is it mindful of those principles? Are you including the members that are really going to drive this forward? So in part of the question and discussion, there may be an opportunity. I'd really love to hear what your core communities at your institutions offer and how do they work. And then just in the slide deck, there is a list of references. This is for general communities of practice, and there's a lot of material out there, but these are ones that I found very practical and applicable. So thank you very much for being part of this community and for listening to my talk.
Thanks, Isabelle. That was great. So glad you're in this session, that we combined. Okay.
Did you remember how to do it?
Yeah, I remember how. I'm looking for your, oh, you're here, up here at the top. You're good to go. We're good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you, Julie, for inviting me to tell you all my story of how we merged and centralized, how and why we merged and centralized as a core about 4 years ago. I'm Karolien. I am a core director at Colorado State University, and my core was established in 2020 from a merger of 3 mostly departmental cores, and at that time we centralized and were brought out of the department and placed under our Central Research Administration, the Office of the Vice President for Research. And while that process was challenging, there were lots of disruptions, and it was pretty messy at times. I hope I can convince you that there's also a lot of positives and benefits to this, especially when I think about the collaborative culture that is now very, very present in my core, and that actually our users really benefit from. And I also think we're a much more resilient core. I think we're more resilient to changes, to disruptions, to financial pressures. So I'm going to start out with kind of going back in time. I was hired in 2014 as an associate director in a shared small facility that was called the Central Instrument Facility. It was a chemistry department lab that literally was established years ago. It was 1986. There was no mention of cores yet at that time. And it was just 4 instruments and 2 staff scientists. And at that time, chemistry was pretty much a very heavy organic chemistry division. And what do organic chemists need? They need an NMR, they need a mass spec, they need a single crystal XRD. And that was kind of, at that time, their shared little unit that faculty was using. But over time, as with most chemistry departments, chemistry started moving into all kinds of directions. So all of a sudden you got analytical chemistry, you got materials chemistry, you got people doing more biological chemistry. That meant a lot more technology was needed, and there was a huge momentum of faculty wanting to write instrument proposals to bring more technology to the department. And it grew. That facility grew to 36 instruments and about 7 staff scientists. And you know, that's a pretty big operation for a new facility to kind of take on. And so the idea was, let's make this something that's shared, let's create a business plan, implement some rates and user fees, and let's open up the doors. So the whole concept of becoming a shared facility that's available to other departments and colleges was kind of established at that time. And of course that meant a lot more users from outside departments and colleges. And that user base changed quite rapidly from being, in the early days, 90% of users coming from the Department of Chemistry. All of a sudden, other departments from different colleges started to trickle in, and chemistry's component or portion of that user base started to decrease. But at the same time, the funding was still very much dominated from one department. So in fact, the Department of Chemistry was funding pretty much 80% of all the staff salaries of the people working in that core. That's a lot. And yet the core was being used by all kinds of departments and colleges on campus. All the promotions, new positions were all supported by one department. If there were expensive instrument repairs that were in excess of what user fees were bringing in, that was paid for by the department. Most of the instrument proposal writing back then was done by PIs who were living in that one department. So, you know, there's this idea of, is this fair? Is one department really responsible for supporting this core that now serves this wider community on campus? So the idea of, should there be some centralized support for cores that operate in this way, and is it fair that one department continues to support that? So around that time, 2015, our Vice President for Research decided to come up with a program where there would be some more centralized support for cores. Basically, their mechanism was to take a portion of the university's FNA out and dedicate that for supporting operations in core facilities. Different units on campus that had shared facilities could apply to that program. It was an internal RFP. It was competitive. You had to write a proposal. And our core was one of those, and we started getting annual funding to help us with our operations. Lots of other cores started to pop up, and all of a sudden you're starting to notice, well, there's a core with mass spec over here, and then there's mass spec in the proteomics and metabolomics facility, and duplication of services started to happen. Research started to become a lot more interdisciplinary. Users are using multiple cores, but there's very different rates and operational models. Services that were just all over the place, and so this idea of can we maybe fix some of these redundancies or competition even between cores that are serving the same users, but they're kind of hoarding their users because they need the money. So the idea of mergers started to come up, and in fact that's what happened. So my facility, the central instrument facility, merged with our proteomics and metabolomics facility and a microscopy component of another core on campus. What helped was that these units were pretty closely located, so all our different services were kind of in buildings that were pretty much in walking distance from each other, so it also kind of made sense strategically to bring cores together under one unit when they're closely co-located, because having them spread out over campus is definitely a lot harder to create one unit, one operational unit out of it. So this process took a good 2 years of planning, a lot of people involved, lots of stakeholders were put into task groups to look at what is already working well in these cores, what should be improved, what can the mergers do to improve this. We had a lot of MOUs written out that basically clarified how base salaries should move over to the Vice President for Research, how would assets move over, what happens to staff. We received a lot of IT support from our colleges. How is that going to be taken care of when those units move out of departments? And I was appointed as the interim director to make this all happen. So my job was to create a unit out of 3 units and to bring people together and make sure that operationally we became much more streamlined and that users had still the same experience as going to those different units, but in much more cohesive structure. So the goals and expectations of this merger was really that there were going to be some really good cost savings and efficiencies created. I would say in some aspects we do. That the unit would be a lot more resilient because it's a lot bigger of a unit, so you have a little bit more give and play when one lab is maybe down for a couple of months. Financially, that's very hurtful for that unit, but in a bigger core, you balance each other out a little bit. Definitely that there's a lot more cross-core collaboration. As a unit, we work really closely together. Our staff meets together across all these disciplines that we have. It led to improved access to our resources. The big fear was that our quality of our services would maybe be impacted. I'd say that didn't happen. There was some idea that we would have increased success with grants and faculty recruitment. I'm not quite sure if that's the case. It's maybe a little too early to see that. And then there was also this idea of more strategic placement of high-end equipment, because when we belonged to one single department, the tendency was that chemistry faculty would just put a piece of equipment in our core, and we had very little say over it. It was pretty much you're going to take this instrument, you're going to make it work. So our core was born in 2020. It's called the Analytical Resources Core. So we merged from 3 existing cores, and we are centralized under the Vice President for Research. That's my theme there. It's a group of 18 professionals, staff scientists, as well as administrative people. And our services are grouped in 3 centers. One is called the Materials and Molecular Analysis Center. It's basically where you're going to find all your NMRs. We have a self-use mass spectrometry lab there. There's a whole lab on materials properties characterization. We have optical spectroscopy there, as well as an X-ray diffraction and crystallography lab. Then we have our imaging and surface science facility or center, where you'll find all our electron microscopes for high-resolution imaging, microanalysis, electron diffraction, crystallography, and we have a whole suite of equipment to look at the chemistry and properties of materials surfaces. And then we have our mass spec-based proteomics and metabolomics center. So it's big core, lots of equipment across different technologies, and it's really cool because the staff that works there now really work together and they learn a lot from each other, and they sometimes they always get together when we get project requests where you might need all that different technology in one project, and they work collaboratively on serving the customer the best way they can. Results from that merger is that our user base really broadened from just being mostly dominated by chemistry. Now we serve all kinds of departments across campus. And the other thing we actually noticed from doing this is we really increased our external user base. And I'm not saying that was kind of a result that automatically came out of this, but I do think that when you have a core facility with lots of technologies, sometimes for an external customer, it is really nice to go to one unit that has the same billing process, the same onboarding process, the same people they can work with. It becomes a lot easier than for them to go from one core to another and be treated differently, or their operational models are very different. So we actually noticed that external customers do like to come back because we have this broad service offering from merging all these technologies together. Our funding is now also very different. We're no longer funded by the Department of Chemistry. A big portion of our salary budget comes from base funding from the OVPR. We get some F&A indirect support for our operations from the course budget, and then the remainder is through our user fees. So that kind of created a more centralized funding model for us, where because of the F&A, there's a component of shared investment in the core. So my role was to really bring this unit together, merge them, have people all of a sudden work together, streamline operations. So a couple strategies and tools that I implemented to make this work was I hired a dedicated business manager who basically her job was to help me merge all our accounts. I mean, we had so many recharge accounts. We now have one for the entire core. Our customer onboarding is streamlined. We merged all our iLab accounts together. So again, for the user, it's nice. They only have to do one click. They don't have to go to 5 iLab accounts. We have one business plan. We have one sheet with all our rates in it. So that all became very streamlined. Collaboration within the core, some of the things there that we use, some tools in Microsoft Teams, highly recommended. It's a great way to bring people together and collaborate on projects. For example, we have a service inquiry form that when one of us gets a call from a customer, we basically fill out this form, and through Power Automate tools, the right people get plugged into that form, and it creates a chat, and people start to talk about the project and discuss how we best serve the customer before we really set up a project in iLab. It was also fun for me to work with people in different disciplines because, for example, we have metabolomics experts on our mass spec side, and I have an NMR expert, and she was interested in doing metabolomics through NMR, and I basically put those two people together, and now they're developing omics-based approaches through NMR and mass spec together. I have an X-ray crystallographer who is very experienced with crystallography software, and in our electron microscopy, they're trying to develop electron diffraction. So I brought those two people together, and they're working together. And it's easy because they're all part of one unit. Sometimes it's a little harder to make that work cross course. Unity, you got to bring people together. So we use Microsoft Teams to have chat groups, to communicate with each other. I built subcommittees in my core where we work on task groups where you bring people together to work on something that benefits the whole core. For example, I have a subcommittee on iLab, subcommittee on DEI, subcommittee on safety. So it allows people to come out of their little bubbles and work together on projects, so it creates a little bit more of a community. We also had to kind of rebrand ourselves. You know, we got a new name. People didn't know what it was. They were still calling us by our old names. So we worked really hard on creating awareness around that. So we have a monthly bulletin where we talk about our impact by interviewing students who use the facility, and we highlight them. They cite us by our RID, and the students love it because we post them on LinkedIn and we make a little bit of marketing for them, and now they're coming to us to ask, hey, can I be interviewed next? So it's really fun. They really appreciate it, and I get a lot more feeling for what everybody does in the facility. So that's our monthly bulletin. It has all kinds of updates about the core, and it really helped with creating visibility about who we are. A lot of other things, we have a LinkedIn site. We do First Friday tours for the local industry community. I'm part of local industry associations to talk to them about our value as a core facility and how we can be a resource to local startups. And I do a lot of meetings with stakeholders. Through Power BI, I present to them our metrics, what our impact is on their faculty, how to use our core, so it gives them a little bit more of an idea of being part of that. So I have 2 slides, one on merger, pros and cons, and one on the centralization part. I would say the biggest positive out of the merger is really the fact that we became a bigger and more diverse team. More diverse team means you got more diverse opinions, and we're just more creative as a bigger team. There's a lot of collaboration, cross disciplines. We can do cross-training, so my people have backups. If they are sick for a week or they're coming to ABRF, they have someone that can step in and help out. We're much more resilient to disruptions, I feel, because we're such a big core, we have a bigger budget, things get balanced a little bit more. I don't know, but as a bigger team, I feel like I'm more competitive with hiring people because it's more fun to work in a big team than to work in maybe a tiny, small core. There's less competition. We work together strategically on what is the next instrument we should write an instrumentation grant for instead of competing over the internal RFPs. Much more streamlined processes, which always help the user. We've got some cost savings because we got rid of some equipment that we had redundancies around. I'm able to offer new services by bringing people together. We have more visibility. Bigger core, we have a bigger presence on our website's a lot bigger. You can find all our services together, so that definitely helped with increasing external business. And the bigger size of a core, we have a little bit more of a feeling that we can afford self-insurance opportunities, again, because we're just bigger and that's how insurance works. Maybe not so much negatives, but challenges I will say with this merger is that my budget's a lot bigger and it's a lot more complicated to manage. I have to balance a lot more stakeholders. VPR, the different colleges, the RADs, the deans, so it's definitely, there's a lot that comes at you. Staffing challenges, that was a big one. Imagine you have 3 cores, they're all staffed with different titles, different pay levels, different authority levels, and now you got to bring them together and change that. So that was very challenging. I'm still working on that. Different cultures, those 3 different cores that were in different departments, they have different backgrounds, different cultures, different ways of doing things. So kind of bringing that together was pretty challenging, and the proportion of base supported salary decreased because my core had 80% salary support and another core didn't. So now we spread that over both or over the whole core together. Centralizing pros and cons, I will say, definitely the positive is that we're no longer controlled by one department, less of an equipment dump. Here's an instrument, we want you to manage it, you take care of it. We have a little bit more say in that. I have more control over my recharge budget. I have direct communication line to the VPR versus in between to a department level. We have broader visibility. We get pulled in as a recruitment resource to all departments when they're hiring faculty. So it's not just one department asking me anymore, but all departments are touring our facility when they bring in new faculty. I have access to central resources like legal, data analytics, all these resources that already live under the Vice President for Research, and I didn't have that in the department level. And I think there's some perceived increased institutional commitment when you live more centrally. Challenges, I will say, I have to justify things a bit more, I feel, when I'm under the Vice President for Research than in a department. I felt like in an academic department, the faculty just know what your impact is because they're your users. In the VPR's office, I have to have more metrics, more data. I got to justify everything. I need to write proposals. So there's more convincing I have to do, and I learn a lot from that, but I felt like we didn't need to do that as much in a department. Bigger unit, less community feel. Faculty are a little bit less invested when you're not part of their department anymore. I also lost graduate teaching assistant support from the Department of Chemistry. That was a big one. We had free graduate students who worked in the core, and now I don't have that anymore. And there's a bit more of a perceived expectation from me as a core director that we have to be more financially self-sufficient than I had when I was part of a department. So if you are thinking of doing this, or you are being told that you have to merge, couple couple points of advice. It's really important to have an invested champion, someone who's going to drive this and really believes in it. Really good to communicate early and often with key stakeholders. Have MOUs, write them down, because leadership changes. So when you don't have it written down and you have a new VPR, they don't remember what was discussed and they don't know what the whole plan was. Be prepared for the human impact. I mean, the people in your core are the engine that make your core work. And it's very challenging to bring people together under one administrative unit. So maybe develop a co-creation mindset, ask them to be part of this process, and report success to them. It's really, really important to highlight why this is really good and what your impact is on the university by having metrics and good measures. And be patient. These mergers take a lot of time, and don't do this under a pandemic. So, and that's it. Thank you. Do reach out. And,
try connecting this up. We have it here. Is it this one? Which one do I connect?
I'm not even going to pretend to know how to
doesn't work.
swap out computers, so. Can we move this laptop?
Thank you. Okay, where am I?
Thanks, Dylan.
There you go. All right, I'm the one who's standing between your drinks or whatever the evening, and so I'm glad that I'm coming after both presentations so that I don't have to repeat a lot of things. So I'm going to focus, as he's working, I'll keep continuing talking so that we can finish quickly. I'm going to focus on a couple of things that I hope that you can use after my presentation, and talking about what's going on.
It's going over here as display notes in here.
Well, shall I keep talking? Yeah, go ahead. Good. Okay, so I'll keep talking. So my background is I was at Fred Hutch before I joined Seattle Children's. Fred Hutch is, if you don't know, has a very, very well-established, centralized shared resources program. I was leading that program, and then I had the opportunity to go to Seattle Children's, which was growing really fast. It's now fourth top-funded pediatric research program in the country. Had no centralized shared resources program. Every department had every corner, some equipment that they all used, and they had their own small shop. And my goal was to really get alignment across the spectrum to build and invest in a shared research resources, program. And we had some cores. I have Jean there, our flow cytometry core director, who was in a department core, and now moved to the shared research resources. Thank you. That's okay. It's a little wavy, but hopefully you can read and just add some style. All right, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to first share a few slides that I used as part of my initial process. I joined during COVID. Actually, my first day was we were setting up emergency command for this new infection going around. But anyway, so it got delayed a little bit, but my goal was to really get alignment from the leadership. So what I did here in my presentation, I got 3 or 4 slides I just copied, presenting as it is. And then I'm going to move into a different part. So this was my biggest, the slide, the argument. I don't have all the slides here, but the why. And I had all the, department chairs, senior leadership in the room, and trying to convince, part of this meeting was trying to convince everybody to align on this, and really getting examples for each of those gaps that we had at that point with lacking a shared resources, and answering the question of why. And then this is something that I want to leave with everybody. If you're not aware, the FACET recommendations, I really love this. It is many of our leaders in our field, I see Phil and Sheena and Nick, and there are many of our leaders who actually worked to get this together. This was a great help. If I go and talk about anything great about shared research resources, it doesn't have the kind of impact when I say FASB recommended this, especially with our department chairs. And I was like, okay, let's look at that. Very helpful. And then you go with each of that. And then, you sell the dream. The idea is bench to bed and back, and there's more to this, but this is one slide that shows like where we could be and how this is going to support our program. How is it going to really enhance our science and get us where we want to be. Then the next step was to put together this senior leadership committee of department chairs and some VPs and really get alignment on some of the principles so that, like Isabelle or Karolien mentioned, make sure it's written down, make sure that we are aligned so that when people change, we don't change our policies or we don't change, the key, the framework of what we are about. So that's what I have. I'm happy to share more details if anybody has questions and if you are going through such a process. But I just want to show some slides from what I could. And I would say we've been successful so far because one measure is that shared research resources is one of the 4 pillars of our strategic plan right now. And that was a big win. That means there's commitment. And we have now continuous so far $2 million for equipment. So we have received, plus some, we leveraged that to get some grants. So we are investing by end of this year $7 million on equipment. And of course, there's more operational support that's coming in. And my leadership has bought into the idea that, there are cores that are in startup mode, which means you have to invest. We can't talk about return of investment at this point, especially financial terms. And we had to look, further and see what can happen in 5 years, what can happen when we get best faculty. So that we're success. And if I have time, I don't think I'll have time, but I could share a core story of a core, microscopy core. Our microscopy scientist, first ever microscopy scientist at SCRI is sitting there. We had a great success story there too, how we could really get our faculty buy in the idea that they won't have microscope in their floors anymore, every department anymore, and that they have to pay for service, which they never did before, and make it successful was fun. So if I have time, I can share, or I can share with you later. So then I'm going to kind of change a little bit. This is when I was at Hutch, and spatial biology was becoming a thing many, many years ago. And that's when I realized that the way we set up our courses, these silos, right? The specialities. And when new technology comes in and connects everything, how do you respond to that? Are you really set up to respond to that appropriately? That was a question that I had. And we talked about, this is a slide from our last year. Myself and Julie was here presenting on the same topic. How do you interact with your researchers? Is it going to be this siloed approach where they go to every core, or is there a better way to do that, the team science perspective? So what I'm going to talk about, so everything, this has to be, right, we can have all this technology, but to really make it happen, it is the people. And there are a lot of things. Karolien touched a lot of those plus and minuses. So all I'm going to do here is to talk about the communication, which I think is critical, so that I can leave you with the tool that we are working on. Many of you probably aware. And go from there. So communication and working together, cross-training, cross-functionality, all about how people work together. And number one is co-location. And who was it? The first presentation that mentioned about be prepared, because you never know when your chance, right, an opportunity comes. I had a proposal as part of my strategic plan to have co-location of the course, because since we didn't have a centralized shared research resource, we were all over the map. Every corner of every building, something is there. And since we had this proposal, we had an opportunity when there's some renovation going on, there was money, and now we're going to get, what we're planning to do is to have open bays as much as possible, except for those equipment like microscopy or Revio. I heard somebody said it's pretty loud. This has a small room, a packed bio. But otherwise, as much as possible, have everybody in the open lab. And we actually have space planned even for the next hopefully 5+ years in the open lab. That was great. The co-locating really helps everybody to be communicating, in person, plus cross-training, support. It's all great. And on top of it, this is the last thing I want to talk about, Power Apps. How many of you use Power Apps already? Okay, so this is a free, typically, just to disclosure, I do have few stocks in Microsoft, not much, but I don't think this is going to force you to buy anything in Microsoft, because you probably don't know, you already have this. This comes with a typical enterprise package with Microsoft. And this is an incredible tool that we found. And I'm going to take the example of, I'm a lab animal veterinarian, by the way, and my team in the animal facility started using this, and now we want to expand it to across the course. So these are the apps developed by our animal facility. What we did is every tech in our facility has an iPhone now. And all our users also have these apps that they can, sorry. All right. So all our users also have the app, for example, the technical service request. If you want to request a service, you can go to your app in your phone and request that. I'm not sure what's happening. All right. All right, so when you open one of these apps, what happens is you have all these data connected to the databases so that you can actually, it's a drop-down list where you can, filling a form, a request made much easier. And every time you do that, it's all pulled into a database. I'll show you a brief outcome. So as you can see, every form, the different apps, each app when you open it, you have different, all the data is there, just drop down list. Rather than typing it, less errors, more, some time saving, and easier collection of data. And this is just to show the back end. You can actually connect to multiple databases and have it all available for pull down lists and making it much, much simpler, but at the same time allowing you to connect and pull in a lot of data. And this is how it looks. So we should have the Microsoft product for this. Unfortunately, we have Tableau for free. So my team usually pull in the data. We can look at, especially in an animal facility, there's so many incidents, safety, animal-related, PI-related, employee-related. We can actually look at, slice and dice this data, look at, is there a tech reporting more incidents in a room, or another tech coming in less, or is there a need for training? Is there oversensitivity? Is there a PI who has you can really look at this thing and say, oh, that PI has a new lab member probably, or that PI doesn't have enough people, probably some people left. All those things can be looked from, and sometimes I like to call the PI and say, there's something going on with your lab. So it's really very helpful. It's a backup, it's a SharePoint. All the data is stored in SharePoint, and then you get to pull all the data and slice and dice and figure out what we can do. And then we expanded it. So one thing we did at part of the shared research resources is not only having the centralized shared research resources, but make sure that people are not duplicating equipment across the building, right? I mean, we all do that, having an equipment catalog. This is a kind of a Wikipedia type catalog that you can use with Power App, where people can put in their equipment, pictures, contacts, so that we don't have to be, my team doesn't have to be in charge of making sure that every equipment is cataloged and updated and all that. And now our faculty is really using it now, because you can search out for things that you want. What people realize is that you have a few MySeqs and few sequencers or other things, that you got duplicated versions of all of these. And our goal is to really make sure that people are not buying. Check the catalog before you go buy another one. So it's really helpful, and it is something that every PI, every faculty can drive themselves. They can add, they can update, so that it's available. It's by building locations or the floors or type of equipment. It kind of pulls in all the data and separates it out. And this is how it looks if you look at the genomics. There's some people have input pictures, but you have contacts, you have this, and so you can basically search it and figure out who has what across the campus. So we are working on, so the cool thing was, Microsoft is in our backyard. They happen to know about what we're doing. And I told them that, there are at least 1,000 research institutions with big shared research resources programs and animal facilities, and this is going to be an amazing thing for you. And they got really excited. They invited our team for a couple of days in their campus, working on their co-pilots and Dataverse, and there's some fun stuff going on. I'm asking them to give it for free because it all costs a little more. But they have a really nice platform there that can help us in different ways, including Power BI. We moved from Tableau to Power BI. It's going to help us a lot. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. But there is a significant opportunity here, real-time feedback, something I said, simple. I wanted what you see in the airport, those smileys, right? It's very hard to get user feedback from everybody. Nobody wants to answer surveys anymore. I mean, same with me. I would not answer surveys unless I have to. But what if you finish using an equipment or a service, and you got those smileys right there. And if you go, I went to those companies which has those smileys, and it cost a lot for each. But you can actually our IT people said you can actually do it on Power App. So I'm thinking maybe we could do that. It's really not details, but you get a better feedback on how things went, and then you can dig down. So there is a lot of opportunity here. And if people are interested, since all of you, I think majority of you have these apps, happy to work with you. Microsoft asked us whether we want to have IP and sell these, or the other option was to just put it in GitHub. And that's what we plan to do. We want to share what we make, but it would be actually great to have a community. If you're interested, we can build a community of Power Apps, and so that we don't reinvent the wheel and share. I think it's going to be a great tool that's available there. That's all I have. 2 things. So.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left, actually 7 minutes and 37 seconds. Unfortunately, Isabelle had a conflict, so she had to step out, but Karolien and Raj are here to answer any questions or take any suggestions that you guys have about how your cores are evolving at your institutions.
Hi, I have a question for Karolien. If you couldn't have not, if you hadn't been able to do a physical merge of your cores, do you think let's say you go through a virtual merge, do you think you would have done it?
Well, this all happened under, is this working? Oh, yeah. We actually merged in 2020, and actually that's when we all went virtual. So we developed a lot of these actually Power Apps and ways to become one unit when none of us were on campus. In fact, our labs didn't move. We were already located kind of in nearby buildings. And I will say, it is still hard, even though you're a building next door, we're still physically in separate labs. We really make an effort to visiting each other. We have one unit over in the other lab. We give unit updates. We visit each other in their own spaces. And so we had to make a conscious effort to make sure that people were moving around and not just sitting in their own silo spaces. But you can do a lot virtual. We have chat channels that are constantly used when someone's gone, or they need some help in the lab, or there's a package that arrived, or they need someone to check on an instrument because they're in another lab doing something. People just help out, and they're working together. So having these Power Apps or Teams tools where you collaborate over digital platforms really help. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Gates. I'm at the University of Michigan. I actually have 2 questions for the audience and then 1 question for the panel. The first question is, how many people in the audience are vice president of research for their institution? Show of hands. So less than half, okay. How many people in the audience are part of a corps and they would like more collaboration with other corps at their institution? Okay, you're
More
talking
than-
to us.
More than half.
More than half, good. You guys, everybody laid out a real rich menu of things that you did to increase that collaboration. What's the first thing that we should do to really manifest more substantive integration across our course?
I'm going to actually start and take that for Isabelle, because I actually think Isabelle laid out that grassroots approach, right? What can you do as core collaborators, right, to develop your community and develop the tools and approaches that you would like to see then that can become available when you actually have the opportunity to present it to leadership. And then I'm going to turn it to these two to say how you go from there.
No, I totally agree, but I would say it should be a two-pronged approach. It's like a catch-22. If you don't have your leadership, top leadership support, there's only so much we can do from a grassroots approach. So I think we need both. And how you time it, what you prioritize in those, it's always great to have a strategic plan coming from the grassroots level. But it's important to make sure that the leadership is ready, they know the why, before we show how or what. So I think it should be a two-pronged approach.
Anything to add?
Well, in my case, I was told to merge, so I kind of had to just execute. But I agree. I think, my benefit was that I did have a team that now all reported to me, so we're just more inclined to, that's what you do when you're part of one unit. But I do think that having a champion or some advocacy higher up to bring people together, have an annual core retreat, we do that now at CSU, so that you know who's who, and that when a customer comes to me and they're asking for proteomics and metabolomics, and now they're also asking for genomics, which is something I don't offer, I can immediately reach out to another core and bring people together to serve them best. I think in the end it's about how you serve your users now. But you need someone who brings the cores together. I think a lot, I'm actually very intrigued with how Isabelle is approaching this, because sometimes it takes a champion from the course to maybe, if you don't have a champion at a higher level, have someone within the course who is inclined to start doing that. And you'll find them. There's always someone who wants to do that. So maybe you find that person.
I just have a comment to that effect. Chris Gilpin and I are starting to do this at Purdue. We've been talking about it for 2 years, and we literally just sent out an email to the core directors and said, we've got coffee and cookies, let's chat. And so we're doing it quarterly. The goal is to have people bring stuff, and right now it's still very much he and I coming up with topics, but that's how we're starting it. So, baby steps. Food and coffee helps. They show up for food and coffee. And we got the VPR to pitch in like $50 a quarter for food and coffee. Right?
Hi, I work with Chris at the University of Michigan. One thing that I heard you say, maybe more Isabelle than anyone, but I'm sure you all have an opinion about it, is building some of the engagement with types of things like this that are big and also impactful towards the staff that are running the course or working in the course. We have a large group of staff that are part of our course at Michigan, and we see different levels of engagement all the time, and I wondered if you had any kind of examples or tips in when things are being built like this or significant changes are being made, and how to bring with you all of the staff and address their concerns or listen to their thoughts and ideas.
I can tell you what I did at Salk when I arrived there 2 years ago is I first started by bringing all the core directors together. John Naughton is here, who's one of our core directors, and he could attest to the fact that they probably didn't get together very often. And I said, it's really important. You guys, I need to learn from you. So I need you to get together with me once a month. But then we also started having core breakfasts with the entire core facility staff. It was everybody who works in every core. There's food, there's coffee. Let's just get together and get to know each other. We've been doing that now. We started, I think we were doing it monthly. We now do it maybe we still do it monthly. We still do it monthly, yeah. And we don't always have an agenda, but I bring to them institutional updates. They bring to me concerns that they have, but mostly it's just about them interacting. So that was one way I think that we started getting the entire team together and making the entire team feel like they matter, their voice matters, and mostly, from my perspective, teach me, tell me what you do, tell me what your needs are, right? That's how we started at SALC. Did you guys have something similar with your teams?
Well, we do it within our own course team, but at CSU we're not quite yet. I like your idea of bringing the course directors more together and having opportunities to share best practices and educate leadership a little bit more. So I'm hoping that that's something we'll see more of. Yeah.
One thing that I can add is that during COVID, we started, at least in my, with our wider shared resources team, we do every other day, like twice a week. But with my comparative medicine team, which is a much bigger team, we have daily 10-minute, usually it's 5-minute huddles. That's after the COVID, emergency's all gone. I asked the team, does it make sense? Do you want to spend this time? And they all thought it's a great way of 5 minutes, using 5 minutes every day. Or sometimes it can go 15 minutes if somebody brings up something, but it's really a check on how, I don't know how, it works in other places, but we found, and it's still ongoing, because people think they like it.
Just one other comment. We just tried to start a core community, and we're still very much in the process of it, and there's many factors involved in it. But one of the very first things we did was have someone come from our Office of Financial Analysis and talk to us about recharge rates. We filled the room and then some with people who were trying to figure out and who were struggling with creating their rates and all of the rules associated with them. So if that's something that you see many of the cores in your institutions struggle with, you will certainly get them there with coffee and cookies, of course.
I've actually found one thing, you have to be careful when you build a community, because sometimes it becomes a community that just allows you to complain, right? And so every month having a complaint session can be helpful, but then it also can be really challenging, So picking a topic and then recognizing that the first 45 minutes might be just people getting things off their chest, but ending the session with we have a goal for something and we're building a tool, right? We all got this stuff off our chest. We're done whining, right? Now let's move on to solutions. But people have a hard time moving right into solution building if they don't actually have the time to whine. So recognize that, embrace it, but then make sure you have something that helps you move on so that you're just not spending all your time complaining. It's a little bit of therapy there.
This is Karolien. I know you said you're still kind of working on it about your staff and the challenges of coming together, because I'm assuming you had 4 different directors before, and then now there's one director. How did you manage that, at least initially, still, since you're still working on it, and what challenges you think moving forward?
That's a really good question. You were right. You're right. We had 3 directors and then an overall director. So I was a director of directors, which was very strange. So I have an associate director who used to be the director. He still carries that title of director in the proteomics and metabolomics side of our facility, but he's becoming more and more my associate director. So him and I are really close. We're working very collaboratively around the leadership part of the core. And my other director actually took a job in industry, and he left, and that position did not get refilled. Instead, we have more of a manager's structure now with individual labs. And the concern there is that people are missing the next step to become, after a manager, to become a director, which was a pathway they had in their previous core. But honestly, most of them are happy they don't have to do all the administrative stuff. They're really happy operating at the management level. I don't know how it will go. It's something I'll have to watch and see where people's ambitions lay. They might leave at a certain point and take a job elsewhere, but I feel like, yeah, that was one of the things we had to address, is we can't have 5 directors in a merged unit. So I think the other bigger challenge that I had was salary equities, because the different cores had very different salary levels and job families, and cleaning that up took time because I didn't have a magic budget to make everybody paid at the same level when they were doing similar jobs and had similar responsibilities. So again, it takes time. It's not something you can do in 1 year. You have to gradually address those issues, and eventually we did solve some of those equities over time, or inequities over time, yeah.
Real quick, because I think we're already over. You talked about creating a community for stealing your power tools ideas. How does one steal your power tools ideas?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So you talked about creating a community to be able to use your Microsoft Power Apps ideas. What's the plan for that? Do we just get your email later? What's the?
So this morning
She
I
wants
thought
your
maybe.
apps. She wants your apps.
Right,
She wants to
right?
steal them.
That's great.
much do you
actually. We want more people working together, and we are happy to channel all that conversation into the Microsoft team, who is really happy to work with us. I actually this morning thought maybe I should start a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
But then I thought it's not there yet. I mean, we can start it now.
Can we start it now? Because I'm afraid that in a year from now, we're going to be like, we should do that. I want your ideas
Let's do that.
tomorrow.
Okay, I will. So how do we do that?
Who knows how to do a
If we-
WhatsApp
I
group?
can start a group, but I don't
Well,
know.
if we so we can message to the app. Or we have the community, the ABRF community. Maybe if
Okay,
we
I'll-
will catch us later.
I'll send a link in there to the ABRF community app. I have that in
Perfect.
WhatsApp. Okay.
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
I'll be very quick. Alex Kramer, University of Minnesota. I'm just curious, as these centralization efforts have undergone, if there, and I think you've spoken a little bit about this, if there's been a parallel HR effort to kind of carve out career tracks and what we can offer to core staff, and if those have kind of coalesced in parallel to the development of the centralization. So sorry if that's complex, but yeah.
Very good question. I hope that that's something at my university they will think about. We struggle with job families and people fitting in those categories that are mostly right now at my university. It's research scientists and research associates. But if you look at the latter, for some people that work in the core, that doesn't fit what they're doing. So we have not developed anything specific for cores. I know that there's efforts that have done where they have done that at Northwestern, I think, OHSU.
OHSU.
Some really good examples out there. I know they took time, several years, but we haven't developed that yet at CSU.
Thank you.
all?
No.
Nope.
Anything else? All right. Well, this has been a great session. Thank you all for being here. Dylan, thank you very much for all the AV support and the rest of the AV team. I really appreciate you guys.